Hello and welcome back. This week I'm going to be experimenting with zippers. It's been many years since I actually incorporated zippers into anything that I made. In fact, I don't know if I've ever done a YouTube video that involves zippers. Here you see some beautiful brass zippers that I got from Weaver. Here are some zippers that are sort of endless. You cut them to the length you need and you crimp a brass stopper on one end or both ends and you use that zipper on the length that you cut. But I'm going to use some of these predetermined lengths. Here I have some beautiful soft leather that would make a perfect zipper bag. Now I thought long and hard about what I wanted to make, and I said, you know what? Let me just keep it simple. I was going to try and do sort of a backpack type of thing or something with a barrel roll, and I said, let me keep it simple because this is focusing on the zipper itself. This is an oiled leather. When you bend it, it lightens up at the bend, which is kind of pretty. It has a really nice soft tactile feel. It's a little grabby, almost feels like rubber, but it is a beautiful soft leather. And if you followed my Instagram, I did a little story where I showed this particular piece has a brand on it from the life that this piece of cattle, that this head of cattle lived. So there's a brand on it, which I left on there. Leather is a natural material, and scars and cuts and brands show up in the final piece of leather. So this piece has that on it. So this is a piece that's 16 inches wide by 23 inches long, and I'm folding it, and I'm using PVA glue. This is jade glue or bookbinding glue. A lot of people are very curious about this, and it is something that I personally use. I don't know a lot of leather workers that use this. I always like gluing things together, and this is a big steel weight that I left on that piece for 20-30 minutes before I was able to remove it and then glue the other side. I'm making sure I'm gluing the zipper exactly in the same position. This is a length of zipper that comes apart like a jacket. So one half would stay on one thing, one half would stay on the other. So that's why I'm able to glue them in two pieces so that one can be on one half, one can be on the other. Now I'm using the Weaver 303, which is not quite an extremely heavy machine, but it's a higher upgraded machine than your average machine that would sew fabric. So this will go through a couple of layers of this leather. I make 4 bags actually in this video. By the time I'm done with this video, I only show me making 2 of them because it's a little redundant. In this particular bag, I sew just through the hem of the zipper on the 303, and then I take the entire bag over to the 205, which is designed to sew through hide and much thicker leather circumstances. But this leaves a nice, beautiful, it's a pretty thin stitch. You don't really notice it. I only had white thread while I made this video, so that's all you'll see me use. I would have preferred to use a darker thread, maybe black or brown, of course. But ultimately, when you see the finished part, you don't really even notice that it should have been brown. And you'll notice I'm back stitching as I come to the end. I back stitch at each. I start with a back stitch and end with a back stitch. So I will start my stitch a little bit far from the end and go in reverse to where I really want to start, and then go all the way across to where I want to end and then back up a little bit. I don't know if that makes sense. But here I'm just feeling out this zipper. I really didn't know exactly where to go just yet. This is my first one. I was going to school on my first one here, and I'm thinking it through. And I really like the way the zipper lands once the bag sides go down to where they're going to live. And I kept it stitched and I turned it inside out. And on the next one, I didn't get so complicated. So now it's turned inside out and it's zippered shut. And it occurred to me that I would probably have a nearly impossible time unzipping it. So between that take and this take, I actually unzipped it. You could notice that the bag is now unzipped. And now this is my Weaver 205. And you see there's what I was describing, where I start forward, come back about a 1/2 inch, and then go over it again. That's why I start away from the end with my back stitch, my forward stitch. And now you see me come back a little bit, and I come back and go forward a touch, just to lock that stitch in at the very end. It's at this point, I'm going to dart the corner anyway, so that back stitch is really unnecessary because it's going to get scissored off. You'll see in a minute. It's just a force of habit. I'll probably do it again right here. Yep, I go back, and it's just a habit. Always end on a back stitch, always start on a back stitch. And now this is what I was talking about with my corners. I pinch these corners. This gives my bag a flat bottom. If you follow my videos, you notice I do this a lot. Did the same thing, started about a 1/2 inch up, went back a 1/2 inch, and then back across it. So I have a lock stitch on either end. And this machine is strong enough to jump over that seam, which is pretty gnarly when those two ends come together, right where I'm scissoring there. And I keep a little snip scissor on the machine hanging on a string so I never misplace it. Same thing, back up. Now I go forward, jump over that seam, which is gnarly, and then I back up and stop. Scissor off, and now I take it over to the bench. My ISO is a little high, that's why these shots are all too grainy. And there I cut that off. Remember I said that back stitch wasn't really important coming down the side because I just cut it off right there. But what I'll do is put a little bit of PVA glue right there so that stitch doesn't want to come apart. It's a pretty gnarly seam. It's pretty tight right there. It's not going to pull apart, but that's just insurance for me that nothing starts to fray. I let that dry for about an hour, then I come in and I turn the bag inside out. And because that zipper is the type of zipper that's at the bottom of a jacket, I can then reconnect it. I'm just seeing what I have here as far as the corners go. The bag obviously ends up being a little bit smaller because now I've sucked up some of the stuff into the seam allowance. But I'm loving this oiled leather. I really like this particular piece of leather. I use it already for several different things. And now the zipper goes across the top. Now I have the two loose ends of the zipper. What do I do with them? There's lots of ways of solving it. I'm an amateur here, so one way to solve it in my practical thought process is let's clamp it with a piece of leather so we have a tug to close and open the zipper itself. I could even put a grommet in there ultimately, but with my PVA glue, I glue and clamp it really tight and let it dry for a couple of hours. I do both ends, and then I come in there and I stitch, and you can see me go back and forth on each end. The stitch didn't come out quite as professional looking as I wanted, but this is the first one. And then I cut the little taper in there with my weaver scissors, which are extremely sharp. And there's my first bag. I'm really happy with this. I love the shape. So I remembered that dimension. I started with 16 by 23. And I'm sure the zipper is probably an 18-inch zipper. So here's another piece of leather I prepared, another beautiful piece of leather from Weaver. Same thing, just run a double stitch on there. And you can see here my ISO is correct, so I'm not quite as grainy. And that thread is nylon. It's nearly impossible to break it. If you were to pull it apart with your hands, you would cut your fingers. It wouldn't break. So it's good, strong nylon. Snipping it all down. Now here I said, let me give it a try. Let me just go for it and see if this machine will go through that. And it went through it like a breeze. No problem. But I would not attempt to do the corner. So I'm just going to do these sides with this machine. Back up, do my double stitch there out of habit. And now take this over. This leather is a little bit thinner than the previous piece, but still jumping over that seam is almost impossible with the smaller 303. And you see me go through and back up. And now I do the other side. These corners create a flat bottom for the bag so it will stand up. And you'll see by the time I do the beauty shots, you'll see that the bags all stand up on their flat bottom. And there I'm cutting that triangle out. I also did glue this joint as well, getting rid of all the fuzzy strings that are dangling. Turning the project back inside out is a little bit of a struggle with some of this leather. It kind of fights you the whole way. And I got to push in the corners with a stick. But I'm going to zoom to the corners in position on each end of the zipper. And what I did this time was it's something a little bit different. I glued them and I let them stay in glued on the clamps for about an hour, hour and a half, and it gave me a nice sturdy bit of leather on there with no stitching. I didn't run the risk of jumping off and messing it up. And now you see how the bags stand firmly on their bottoms, especially if there was stuff in them, of course. Looking good. I made a third one off camera, actually a fourth one too. In the fourth one, I just cut a window out of a piece of leather and sewed the zipper in there, so the ends of the zipper are hidden inside the bag. You'll see that at the end. You can see that stitch line up close and personal again. You can see how beautiful that stitch line is, and that is definitely because of the machine, quality machine. This is that little bag I was talking about where the zipper is hidden inside because right where my thumb is, it just cut a window for the zipper, stitched it, turned it inside out. It was a little bit of a mess. to be honest with you. And there, I did the same thing. I glued the tabs. In that case, I sewed them on the small machine on the pull tabs, and I jumped off. They didn't come out great, but this is my first zipper thing in many, many years. I used to put zippers into vinyl stuff. It's the first time I'm actually putting zippers into leather stuff. So thank you for watching, and thank you, Weaver Leather. If you want to get into leather work, go to Weaver's website and get yourself a starter kit. It's a lot easier than it looks, and it's a lot of fun.